Michael Ansara, author of The Hard Work of Hope. Thank you so much for coming into the studio today.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
So tell us about your book, the name, where you gathered inspiration on it, and what should viewers get excited about?
So it's a memoir, and it's a memoir of the years 1960 to 1983. And it carries me through my early involvement in civil rights, and then student movement and the anti-Vietnam War effort, and then into community organizing and mass fair share. I had a very hard time figuring out a title for it, and then I was reading a wonderful poem by a great friend of mine, Kathy Aguera, that is about hope. The title isn't The Hard Work of Hope, but it ends with The Hard Work of Hope, and I thought, yes, that's exactly what the book is about and what we need to keep doing.
Right. And that hard work of hope has sort of transitioned over the years into what we see today, right? So, yeah, in your book, you really reflect on the 1970s Vietnam War protests, you know, what that looked like and how we're sort of seeing this resistance today. What are the similarities in this type of activism?
Well, so, one is just the division that plagues the country and the fact that we're mobilizing against a government that is really following wrong-headed policies. In those days, it was the war in Vietnam, which was just an absolutely unnecessary, unjust, and terrible war. Today, it's the assault on the Constitution, on freedom of speech, on immigrants, on every part of the government that the Republicans don't like. So it's a different set of issues, but once again, what's needed is people organizing and protesting and being able to convince people who don't agree with us today to come over to our side, and that's only done by listening to them. So it's in some ways very familiar. It's in other ways quite different. Both the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement started as prophetic minorities. Well, today, a majority of the country is opposed to the policies being followed by the Trump administration. But they have to be organized. They have to be convinced to join the active opposition. And that's the process of organizing. That's the process of the hard work of hope.
Absolutely. And, what that looked like then versus now, people out on the street, people, camping on their campuses, refusing to leave in the name of justice. So we're seeing just as much divisiveness, like you said, maybe even more because there's such a more widespread source of issues. How can we continue to build support for these progressive movements, even though so much of our population disagrees entirely?
So I think when you actually talk to people about the issues of their lives, not of party labels, not of ideology, but what's actually happening in their lives, I think there's a lot of commonality. People are struggling. People can't afford housing. People can't afford health care. And so the way to bridge the divides is not to preach to people, not to yell at people, but to talk, engage with them, listen to them, and find the points where their lives are motivating them to join in the actions. That's called organizing and building organizations. When we started organizing against the war, it was a tiny group of people who were with us. Everybody, college presidents, generals, cardinals, everybody was for the war. So the only way we were able to convince them was not just through protest, but through real conversation and engaging, not yelling at them, but listening to them, not abandoning our principles, but really talking with people.
Right. And how you're explaining it sounds like, that those circumstances of conversation don't happen as often as they should these days. So how can we build these connections across party lines, across racial lines, across political, ideological differences? What tools are we missing today?
So today, just think about it. There are scientists and researchers who are seeing and who are appalled at the destruction of America's scientific infrastructure. Who's organizing them? There are veterans who are suddenly seeing a real decay of service in the Veterans Administration. Who's organizing them? There are about to be millions, 15 million people who are going to lose their health care once the Republicans pass the current reconciliation bill. There are going to be something like 100 to 150 rural hospitals that end up closing over the next 3 years. Who's there talking to those folks?
Totally. And, you know, the Trump administration, as it's begun and sort of started to spin out of control, we're all sort of preoccupied with that. But, you know, since the Vietnam War protests, there have been many decades of protesting and activism. How can we draw on those past experiences as well?
What we need is a new generation of young organizers.
Totally.
It's always young people who will bring about historic change. And, you know, I'm old now, and so all I can do is really cheer them on and offer whatever support and whatever insight, which is why I wrote the book.
Right.
I wrote the book in the hope that younger activists would read it, learn from our mistakes, which were many, and from our successes, which were also significant. You know, I think there are lessons. I hope they will learn them. I return to some of the most profound ones, like our inability to hold simultaneously the need to protest and the need to win elections.
Right.
Right. We couldn't hold both of those. It was sort of in our minds either or, so we opted for protest long after the time had come when we needed to move into the electoral arena and contest for power there. And then small things, you know, like symbols. We ended up in our disgust with the war and our real disgust with our leaders marching under flags of the National Liberation Front when we should have always been marching under the flags of America. So I hope there are a lot of lessons from our past that people can learn reading the book.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael, for joining us. Could you tell our viewers where they can learn more about the book and more about you?
So I have the ubiquitous website, www.michaelansara.org, and you can learn about the book there. There's even a small video about the book, and it's starting in July 15th. It's available in bookstores and online wherever you buy your books.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael, for joining us today.
No, thank you. Pleasure.